Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joined us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atamanova. We start our operation today. It's year 9 of the war, and it's 300 days of the full-scale invasion of the Russian aggressor in our land. And I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war. Our brief schedule of events for today, prepared by our team, is as follows. At 14 o'clock, we will have Yuri Nat joining us online. He's the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. We will be talking about the work of our Air Force and yesterday's attack. At 14:30, Pavlo Grod, president of Ukrainian World Congress, will join us online, and we will be talking about the activities of Ukrainian World Congress and their help to us. Joining us right now is Liubomyr Mysiv, Deputy Director of Sociological Group Rating, and we will be talking about the celebration of Christmas of Ukraine. No matter the constant shellings, we're preparing to celebrate Christmas, and the Sociological Group Rating made a study on when the Ukrainians want to celebrate Christmas. Mr. Liubomyr, please, can you please tell us how many Ukrainians will celebrate Christmas in just 5 days, and what's the number of Ukrainians who don't want this celebration to be rescheduled, so to say? Good afternoon. I want to tell you about the methodology that we used during our study. This is a traditional research. We were doing it since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, since 24th of February. We had a few blocks. We did the research in 19 waves about this so-called rescheduling of the date of Christmas. We were studying the attitude to the traditional holidays and to Christmas as well, and there are different results in this research. But if we remember the discussion about moving the date to the 25th of December, it was activated a few years ago. We started doing the specific research on this subject. We made another 2 questions on when Ukrainians want to celebrate Christmas and what's their attitude to the idea of celebrating it on the 25th of December in general. We questioned 1,000 respondents. We finalized the research on the 25th of November. It's been 1 month ago, but in the questions like this, we cannot observe very rapid changes in way of thinking of the Ukrainians. So we had an opportunity to complete it in a number of waves. Well, talking about the results in general, there is an interesting tendency. We cannot say it's very rapid, but the social attitude to the celebration of Christmas changes gradually, not rapidly, but gradually. So we observe the growth in number of those who switch to a different date, to the 25th of December. The number of citizens of Ukraine is still not critical, but there is a clear trend. There is a number of reasons for that, and first of all, it's that the general opinion of the community is being influenced by the world agenda. I mean, the celebration on the 25th of December, which has been popularized in Western media and in Ukrainian media as well. And Ukraine is moving its vector of development to the Western world, obviously. That's why the majority of those who talk about switching to celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December, well, there is a large number of such persons. 5th of December, well, there is a large number of such persons among the young population. So it's not like a tradition for them mostly, but more over pastime, so to say. Also, in Ukraine, another reason is that after 9 years of war, as you just mentioned, after the 24th of February, now that we're having the full-scale invasion of Russia and Ukraine, in our data, we've seen the moving of the vector of the social opinion to pro-Ukrainian position. against Russian narratives. So the society actually joined around the fight against the common enemy, and it influences the general social opinion as well, including the attitude to religious holidays. And the withdrawal from the 7th of January, celebrating Christmas together with the Russians, it influenced on the part of the Ukrainians in a way that they switched their opinion to celebration on the 25th of December. And the third important reason is that we're having another breakdown that we did previously. We have to understand also that starting from 2014, Crimea is occupied and the part of Donbas region is occupied, where we cannot question our citizens. So in those regions, we could observe the most concentration of the population with a pro-Russian opinion, who belong, for example, to Moscow Patriarchate Church, and they're most conservative in terms of switching to other dates of the celebration of the holidays. And it obviously influences the change of opinion around those questions all around Ukraine. And even without those facts, we still observe the same trend, because we actually started questioning the populations back in 2016. So we can extrapolate it on the whole of Ukraine, and we can document these changes thanks to the change of opinions in the southeastern regions. So as to the general results, the respondents responded in the following way. Today, 11% said that they will celebrate on the 25th of December, and 25% said they would celebrate on both dates, and 55% said they will traditionally celebrate on the 7th of January. It's interesting to mention the regional, confessional, and age breakdown. I would like to draw your attention to age and confessional breakdown. The idea of celebration Christmas on both dates or on the 25th of December is mostly supported among the youngest and the eldest category of the population. Those are two age groups, because for the youth it's more of a pastime related to media. For example, the opinion formed by the media together with the rest of the Western world. And in elder population, now that they're mostly like the most religious group, who adhere mostly to the religious traditions, is the question of the worldview. And this switch seems very interesting, that the vector changes in that category of population. It tells about the general social opinion changes. And as to the confession, in the view that we have questioned a small number of respondents, it's not a complete content, I mean, in terms of religious categories, but the most of those who celebrate on either 25th or on the both dates is mostly seen in the Catholics category. Now they grew a little bit this year, and we see that also maybe up to 1/3 of the representatives of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, it's more than half of the total number of those questions. So we can say it's a core of Ukrainian confessional society. We see that it's 1/3 of them who, or like 10%, are ready to celebrate on the 25th of December, and other 25% of them are about to celebrate on both dates. However, 2/3 of this category will celebrate traditional on the 7th of January. There's one interesting group who do not refer them to either confession, and we would say that maybe one large category of those belong to, large part of this category belongs to the Moscow Patriarchate Church. But since there is a pressure exists on this part of the population, they just keep their confession silent, or they just call themselves Orthodox, or they say they're not believers at all. And we see that a large part of them will also celebrate on the 7th of January. So there is no such a revolution as we would like to talk about now. But generally, talking about the support of the overall idea, the support and the celebration, I mean, it's like declaration of action and the action itself. So the situation there is as follows. About 44% support the idea of switching holiday to 25th of December, and the third of those questions, it's about 31% say that they are against, and about 1/4 said that it doesn't make a lot of difference to them. But again, we observe certain trend of support, the growing trend of support, which actually was going on which actually was developing before the full-scale support, gradually, very gradually, and maybe not as rapid as those who support this idea would like it, but we still track the clear trend, as I already mentioned, the reasons and the influence of the general globalization. It's a discussion, if we remember it back in 2012, 2013, it was a very narrow field discussion. And first of all, now that we made 25th of December a public holiday, a day off, the popularization, specifically after we obtained Thomas, and now that Ukrainian chooses its way in its way of confessional development, we have this discussion very actively growing now in the society. And support of this idea is growing, and there is a positive trend, and we see the number of those supporters gradually growing. But it doesn't really mean that doesn't necessarily mean that they are about to celebrate Christmas on the 25th, because the people will mostly celebrate it still on the 7th of January. But talking about the age, social, and confessional breakdown, for us as a sociologist, we don't see a lot of surprises there, because the support of this idea was mostly in Western Ukraine, where Greek Catholic Church has a lot of influence, and this trend exists there from the 90s, actually. And second, we see the city of Kyiv, but not as some religious center, but as a progressive cosmopolitic center where the new ideas usually emerge. So among the population of Kyiv, this idea has very extensive support as well. And traditionally, East and South as the most conservative regions, as I mentioned, that in those regions are very influenced by in terms of their opinion by Moscow Orthodox Church. So this discussion of switching to Western traditions is slower there, and we understand that there are certain stereotypes exist there in relation to everything Western, starting from back from Soviet era times. Not talking about only celebrating the Christmas, but anything at all. Also, we see an extensive support of this idea among the elder population. But again, as I mentioned, they're most conservative in terms of following religious traditions. So for us, this indicator is quite a surprise in these terms. And the youth usually supports this initiative, but this time we're seeing that the elder population supports it as well. Actually, we're against that, but we can explain the overall situation, because it's mostly related to the Russian aggression and withdrawal from everything Russian, which influences public opinion mostly. And again, in confessional society, the Greek Catholics support this idea mostly. The Orthodox Church in Ukraine is the most extensive group, and we see the domination of one opinion in this regard, but there is certain contradiction because 46% support this idea, meanwhile 34% are against. And I think that this discussion will be not so political, but mostly confessional and public. It's a discussion around the faith. It will be always complicated because the question of calendar separation, as we know, that the descending of the fire, it explains in the religious context what was happening during that holiday. So I think that this discussion will be going on and on for a long time. And before this briefing, I had a discussion on the Ukrainian radio. We have to have understanding that most of the public religious holidays will be rescheduled to different days. For example, the day of Saint Nicholas that we celebrated yesterday, it will be celebrated on the 6th of December, and then there will be a question not only about Christmas, but many other holidays that people are used to celebrate on certain days, or Saint Ivan or Saint Peter, that they're used to celebrate on certain days. So it's not a matter of 1 year, but this evolution will be going on, but it will be very lengthy, but it will mostly originate from the religious communities and not those who attend church, because it's most sensitive to them. Well, that's pretty much it on my end, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Mr. Liubomyr, you mentioned that not so long ago, 25th of December became a day off in Ukraine. Did this contribute to the fact that people started celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December? Yes, obviously it reinforced the idea of celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December, because now that it became public holiday, that the state put it on that date, people started supporting it. Now that we don't even see the majority of the society supporting this idea, but it obviously reinforced the idea. But it's not such a significant factor because, again, as I want to emphasize, the discussion will be not in public space, but in religious community mostly. We've seen this trend clearly developing from the 2016. So we see how many people already started celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December. You, as the sociologist, see the trend more clearly. If we, for example, look 1 year ahead as a sociologist, how can you forecast the growth of this indicator? Well, if we would have lived in peacetime, we would forecast the gradual growth of those who celebrate on the 25th of December, but how it's going to happen during war, it's a little bit difficult to forecast, or at least under conditions like this, if we remain in these conditions, we'll obviously observe the trend of growing number of those who celebrate on the 25th of December, because it's an evolution of the attitude, evolution of opinion. The age group of those who are younger now grows, and they will become elder, and for them it will never be something surprising. I mean, the celebration on the 25th of December. And they have this trend of going away from Moscow in everything and all, and this will be reinforced by this idea as well, and it will be stimulated by this withdrawal from Russian ideas, and it will stimulate traditional adherence to support this idea of switching to new calendar. So we have to understand that 25th of December is the Catholic date. And if we look back into history, there is a theologic nature of this difference between Catholics and Orthodox. So the question is how this group will define this switch within their religious community. Dear colleagues, your questions, please. Good afternoon. Alena Sadkova, Ukrinform. In continuation of my colleague's question, I would like to ask you. You said that more and more people support the idea of switching dates to the 25th of December. But again, how many time will we need so that this question does not exist for us anymore, so that we know that we celebrate it on the 25th of December and that's it? Well, I understand your question very clearly, but in my opinion, I want to repeat myself. There are two ways of development of the society. There is a revolutionary way and evolutionary way. So let's simplify it. If we do it during peacetime, during normal life, and without some drastic circumstances in the society, it would happen maybe in 10, 20 years after one generation. It would be a dominating opinion in the society. However, let's remember that on the 14th of January, we celebrate this old new year. However, it happened more than 100 years ago in 1917. And you know, it would be the same situation here. The people would celebrate Christmas in both old way and the new way. Now Ukraine is on the verge of some global changes, and we're on the verge of some circumstances that are out of our control sometimes, but it actually reinforces the changes happening in the society. And I cannot say that it would not happen, say, in 5 years, or it would not be as a general consensus on the level of the state and the church that we would forcibly switch to a new calendar, and the part of the communities will just have to submit this this resolution. But again, in the religious community and in state community, there should be a total consensus so that politicians do not start this discussion around when should we celebrate Christmas, because what Ukrainians like to do most is quarrel, and another discussion around Christmas during war is something that we clearly don't need. And if there is a consensus, even if we see it as sociologists, that would be an important decision, but it should be taken on the general state level. And another thing, you were researching the adherence of the Moscow Patriarchate Church. Do we clearly understand that 40% of this group are about to celebrate on the 25th of December? No. I want to emphasize that due to the small number of respondents, we could not clearly identify those who identified themselves as the adherents of the Moscow Patriarchate, but really there are those who do not believe in that category, and we could just assume that about those who say they're non-believers, they really identify themselves as the Moscow Patriarchate adherents, but the transition in their community to any new opinions is quite difficult, and I'm not ready to tell you how many of them will celebrate it on the 25th of December. Thank you, dear colleagues. I will remind you, joining us was Liubomyr Mysiv, the deputy head of the Sociological group rating. Our next meeting is at 1400. Joining us will be Yuri Ignat, spokesman of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.